Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the library tour of Doom, a tour of pretty much every book ever written and published in English that Lord Ganesha and I are conducting in order to improve your moral fiber. It originally was going to be simply an ordinary library tour on this channel, but then I thought, why not stretch it out forever? So that's what we're doing. We're not doing one shelf at a time or one bookcase at a time. We're doing one book at a time. And our book today is from America's Bicentennial. It's from 1976. By the famous writer John Steinbeck, although this is arguably one of his least famous books. This is The Acts of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. And this is a trade paperback that was put out by Del Rey, is that right? By Ballantine. This was put out by Ballantine Fantasy, complete with the ornate cover design and a Darrell K. Sweet inner cover. There is King Arthur and presumably Lancelot and the wizard Merlin, and Ballantine did its best to make this look like a high fantasy novel. And it is, this is Arthurian fantasy at its most traditional. The subtitle there on the cover says, from the Winchester manuscripts of Le Mortateur by Thomas Mallory and other sources. That is John Steinbeck, who left this work unfinished. That is his protestation that he is largely freestyle translating this rather than writing it himself. But he had been obsessed for most of his intellectual life with some sort of epic about Arthurian legends, about the Arthurian world. He'd been fascinated by a boy's King Arthur when he was younger, and I believe there is a graduate thesis to be written somewhere on the unseen but almost universal effect that T.H. White's book, The Once and Future King, had on not only Steinbeck, but many, many, many writers, because it is so overwhelmingly great. It is such an overwhelmingly beautiful, powerful, moving, wrenching, strange, and above all, stunningly honest outpouring of literature. And it's on this subject. It is, in other words, the epic on King Arthur that all of these writers wanted to do. That all of them wanted to do. And so many of them did. In the 20th century, you see Arthurian epics everywhere. Just everywhere. Almost every writer had one in mind. And they still do. They still do. There are plenty of writers who have going careers as fantasy writers or writing espionage thrillers or whatnot, who have in a bottom cabinet somewhere a lovingly tended and never-ending manuscript about King Arthur. It's something about the allure of this story. I never know what to do about that, because this story has its epic already. It's like if all of these authors were saying, well, I read all around, I read widely, and I have lots of interest, and I have an active writing slate on my own, but deep down, I dream about a giant 1,500-page epic set during Napoleon's march on Russia. It's like they're saying that, and you're in the audience saying, well, what about War and Peace? You can't say that. I often wonder with authors like this, but I put it aside in order to look at what they do. And I liked what I found in here. I don't believe for a minute, having done a bit of spot comparison, I don't believe for a minute Steinbeck's rather tenuous claims that this is in any way an active translation. This is just a pastiche. This is his homage to Arthurian legend, and especially to the Arthurian legend that he found in Mallory. And as such, it's very good. I have always liked this book more than any other John Steinbeck book, and I wonder if that isn't because it's the least Steinbeckian. It has very much. It has an antique narrative style. You should know that ahead of time or sample it before you go in, because if you don't expect that, if you expect this is going to read like Steinbeck, you will find yourself on a different planet, one that perhaps does not have a breathable atmosphere. But it nevertheless has a lot of Steinbeckian attitudes in it, under the surface of that pastiche, under the surface of the antique language and whatnot. There are many, many moments scattered all throughout this book where the characters come to John Steinbeck kind of realizations, or they have John Steinbeck kind awkward moments that aren't in Mallory, or that if they are cast differently. It makes for a fascinating reading experience, although I have to include a caveat. A couple of them, actually. Number one is the one that I already mentioned. If you go to this looking for Steinbeck, the Steinbeck that you love, you're not going to find it. But number two, I've never been 100% sure uh, how much of this would really be readily understandable if you weren't saturated with Arthurian legend the way Steinbeck was and the way his ideal readers were. I don't if you're not that, I don't know how much this would work. That's not entirely true with The Once and Future King by T.H. White. It's certainly not true of Le Morte d'Arthur itself, which you should definitely read. This book has some of the pitfalls of pastiche fiction, and the main pitfall of pastiche fiction is that you have to know the original. Most of the time, you have to know the original. The pastiche will not have the same power or will make no sense at all. This will make sense. You could definitely read this. People have. A couple of enterprising teachers have even assigned it in class. But I don't know. I have my doubts about how translatable this is to any other part of Steinbeck's massive fandom. So it's with a caveat. I love it, but I recommend it with a caveat. You go into it cautiously. Give it a try. This is not one of those books in this Library Tour of Doom or in any other video that I make where I'm saying you will love it. I am not saying that. The groundwork has to be right, or you have to do a little bit of extra work. But it was the next book, and I'm not planning these things. I'm not doing anything ahead of time. Lord Ganesha and I want you to be surprised, because that shakes up the certitude that is the main obstacle to wisdom. Can I get a high five? No, he doesn't do high fives. He mostly eats and ogles the ladies. It's my kind of deity. Anyway, that is your book for today. It is John Steinbeck doing Mallory. Who knows what tomorrow we'll see. I will convene then and see you when we do that. Thank you, Book 2.